Good morning, everyone. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Karen McCreedy, who is a Cheadle author and is a writer of British history and film-related non-fiction as well as science fiction. Today we're very happy to say that she's agreed to read extracts from her first two books of the science fiction trilogy, Unreachable Skies. So without further ado, I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Karen McCreedy.
As Joe said, my name is Karen McCreedy. The Unreachable Skies are my first two novels, although I have been writing articles and short stories for about 10-12 years now. I grew up in Cheadle, although I now live in West Sussex, but I come back regularly to visit family. Unreachable Skies is set on a distant planet, and the creatures that live there, the Dracs, have wings and fur and can fly. But on a world where it's normal to fly, what happens if you can't? The first extract I'm going to read is from the first chapter of the first book in the trilogy. Zarda, an apprentice fate-seer, a sort of psychic, has been sent to watch over the hatching of a very important egg because her teacher is too ill to go. I didn't hear Callis command to enter the room, but obviously Morell did, for he opened the door with a flourish, dipped his ears as he moved into the room, and stepped to one side to allow me to enter the chamber. "Lord, I regret to report that Vizan is unwell," he announced. "He sends Zarda as fate-seer in his place." I set my wings and ears to the appropriate angle and bowed low, then straightened up and waited for Callis' command. "Zarda, the apprentice." Callis' voice dripped with disappointment and displeasure, and I had to make a conscious effort to stop my fur standing on end. The Prime stood beside his nestmate Varna in the middle of the chamber, next to the platform that held the nest and the egg. Varna, her pale fur bristling with worry, didn't take her eyes from the egg, but Callis stood straight, his bulky, black-furred frame towering over me. His white tunic glowed in the light of the torches that lined the walls, and the crystals in the badge at his throat sparked red in the torchlight. "What ails Vizan?" he asked, the words bouncing off the walls in a deep rumble. "Is it the sickness?" "No, Lord." I took one hesitant step forward. "He's old. He says it is his time." "Well, it's very inconvenient of him." Callis' voice became a growl, and I felt that it was not the right moment to point out that Vizan was probably not happy about it either. Callis was already annoyed. No need to add to his impatience. "So tell me, apprentice," he said, indicating the walls and nest with a circling finger. "Is everything as it should be?" Vizan had been responsible for the arrangements in the chamber, so there was no reason for doubt. Was Callis testing me, or was his question no more than the natural anxiety of any sire about to see his first offspring hatch? Either way, a swift glance around and a brief sniff assured me that all the traditions had been properly observed. Sweet-smelling avalocks had been woven into the nest, lit torches in ancient copper brackets spiralled up the otherwise unadorned walls, winding in overhead to the ceiling's central point. A single candle had been lit to mark the time, and a shard of Callis' own shell, brought from the egg vault, had been placed in the nest itself. I flicked an ear to acknowledge Limar, the nest nurse, who was sitting on the raised nesting platform, stroking the coarse purple shell and murmuring encouragement to the occupant within, then turned my attention back to Callis. "It's perfect, Lord," I assured him with a little dip of my head. "All that's necessary now are the traditional prayers." No sooner had Callis and Varna spoken the refrain and spiralled their paws over their tunics than a crack split the egg's shell with a faint tearing sound. Around me the odour of anticipation and excitement grew stronger. Limar gave the egg a little pat, her posture and odour exuding self-importance. "That's it," she said, her voice strong but soothing. "Tap a little harder, you're nearly through." She could, of course, have ripped the shell apart with her own claws, but that would not encourage the strongest. If the hatchling couldn't break out of its own shell, it would ultimately be too weak to survive. It must prove itself from the start or die. Tiny cracks crept down the sides of the egg, every minute split greeted with bleats of hope and excitement from Varna. This wasn't her first hatchling, of course. She had produced Limar from her proving egg with a guard flight mate 2 cycles ago. But her new pup would be prime someday, Spiral willing, unless... I pushed my doubts aside, remembering the vision that Vizan and I had shared. This hatchling was destined for great things. There was no way he could be affected by his damned sickness in the way that others had been. Could he? Hello.
Yeah, have you been inspired by any particular science fiction authors, and especially women?
I do like Tanya Huff and her Confederation series. I like Elizabeth Moon's sci-fi, and particularly the characters that they come up with. I think they're terrific and wonderful writers. I also, I think in terms of inspiration, perhaps for this, I read one of Lloyd Biggle's titles, Lloyd Biggle Jr., and it's called The Still Small Voice of Trumpets, and it's one of the subplots is a sort of triumph over adversity, and I'm hoping that this is also going to be kind of that sort of story as well. So yes, there's been inspiration from probably lots and lots, but those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah.
In terms of writing a trilogy, is that quite ambitious for a first novel, writing a novel? And how does that work in terms of, if you're writing one book, are you guaranteed to then get through the other ones and publish the other ones and so on?
I didn't set out to write a trilogy.
Oh, right, okay.
I got the idea, and I wrote an outline of what actually is essentially the entire plot line for all 3 books. And as I began to work on it, I thought actually this might be more than one book. So I split it and thought, okay, I think that will be a good place to finish the first one. And I worked on that because the way that I write is that I work the plot first. I find out what's going to happen, and then the characterization kind of falls out of that, the who it's happening to and why. I know there are some authors who actually, they can't write a word unless they've got backstories and biographies for all of their characters, but with me it's the plot kind of comes first. So I have to know the ending before I can actually write the beginning as well. But yes, I didn't intend it to be a trilogy. But when I'd finished the first book, or I thought I'd finished the first book, and I was getting feedback on it at a writing conference, and at that point I was working on the second book, and one of the people giving me feedback was an agent, and he said, "What are you doing at the moment?" And I said, "Oh, I'm writing the sequel." And he said, "Don't do that, because if you can't sell the first book, you're wasting your time writing the second one. So write something else." So I did as I was told, and I also changed the beginning of the book as well, having got the feedback from 2 people who told me something very similar about the first chapter. And then when I'd finished the first book and I was sending it out, at least I was able to say, yes, it's the first book of a planned trilogy, and this is how far I've got with the other 2 parts.
Cool.
So then my publisher was able to say, yeah, that's fine, we'll give you a contract for all 3.
Right, and once you've got that, you can then safely write the...
then you can safely write the second and the third, yes.
Cool.